All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the February 27th edition of the SIG Network meeting. As always, this meeting is governed by the Kubernetes Code of Conduct, effectively boiling down to be nice to one another. So please do be nice to one another. Please use the raise hand feature in Zoom to ask questions or interject. That helps us to prioritize and organize interjections and questions. It's an open agenda. We don't really have any agenda today, so we may just do triage and a couple of light things, which is fine. However, if you would like to add something to the agenda, you may. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share the agenda. And we'll get started right away with triage. So I did open up triage, but I grabbed, starting with the oldest first, the things that don't have owners, if we don't mind going through those first. This one
I'd
might
also like
actually.
to, if we
Go ahead.
can, there's a few that the triage bot reopened for triage that have been marked as triage but are a year old or something. So we can also maybe look at those if we have a moment.
This might be one of them. So yeah, this first one is one of those, and it's from 2021, and it says pod readiness probe cannot be directed at specific IP family. When trying to deploy an IPv6 only application in an IPv4 dual stack cluster, I noticed that the following readiness probe will fail because it is trying to probe the first pod IP, which is IPv4. I expect it should be configurable which of the pod IPs should be probed. Go ahead.
I was about to say this reminds me of another duplicate issue that I've read that Antonio had raised, and it's part of that KEP that I'm working on. So maybe you can assign this to me and I can try to see what to do with it.
Sure. Thank you.
You just fold into your larger probes work?
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Or fix the probes.
There's definitely a duplicate of this somewhere.
If only we had some AI system that could scrub through all of our issues for dupes.
Oh wait,
Oh, actually, it's linked there, isn't it? Isn't that the epic?
This is, sorry, yeah, I didn't realize that this was a reopened for triage bug. So yeah, this is the dupe I'm talking about.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, thank you, sir.
You can also triage accept it. I'm pretty sure we still think this is a real issue.
And let us know if you get stuck with that at all, Surya. That sounds like you got a good beat on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to be careful. You've got this big probes thing, and I totally agree with the mission there, but it runs the risk of being more than any person can chew.
Yeah, I've been working with Dan and trying to cut it down into smaller chunks. And I really did want to get one of those SIG auth ones, at least the ones where we add the PSA as a first chunk, but I missed the deadline and for the KEP. So let's try the next release. But that's a great heads up. I probably also need to break that down into further. And we have a Contrib Summit session to talk more about this to see if we can nail that down further.
Great.
Sounds good. And then let's double check. Is this a reopen? So this is a reopen as well. And this one says available condition controller escalatory check behavior during network partitions.
Oh, this is because it's broken by design.
Okay.
It's a controller on the aggregator uses a single object. So the problem is you have three controllers. Each controller is going to try to put their state in the single object, but each controller has a different view of the network. So they can be, what is the name? Hold looping or something. One try to say I don't have connected, and the other say yeah, I do have connected.
Okay. What should we do about it?
Is this really a SIG network, or did it just get tagged as us because it involves a network partition?
Well, I used to see that
it is also tagged API machinery.
Yeah.
I think it was tagged for us because the symptom results in endpoints behind the service being disappeared.
Okay. So then is it the answer that we should remove SIG network and say this, it symptomatically shows up as networking, but this is a proper API machinery thing?
Yeah, I mean, we said that in 22. And I'm just scanning forward.
Well, they removed SIG API machinery, then it got put back.
I'll take this one. I'll respond and see if I can tag in the right people.
Okay, thank you. We have a flaky test. This one's from the end of last year, and Antonio has taken a look at it, and it says that a couple of particular jobs are flaking.
No, this is the one that someone implemented the Dan. Remember the node for
What's skip to the end?
Skip to the end.
yeah. There is one node for I don't have the word today. In the
Sorry,
E2E, the thing, the node port allocator that we built for the E2E, right, Dan?
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was basically fixed, and then there was some unrelated flake, and Antonio was like, "No, that's not."
Did the last comment say something along the lines of this is fixed, but we're waiting for confirmation? We'll close for confirmation, but this looks healthy now. We'll wait to close for confirmation, sorry.
So they're dealing with it.
Okay. This one is from this year. Okay. So this one is networking granular checks. Pods should function for intra-pod communication. SCTP, Linux only. All right, so these jobs are failing.
Well, it's probably failing because they don't actually have SCTP support in their cluster. Yeah.
Edit a skip. Only test case that is not skipped. Are we sure that we are using testing feature SIG network jobs? Okay.
Assign it to me. I'll update everything.
Thank you. Sounds like it just needs a little bit of confirmation here. Alrighty, and then last of the unassigned ones was just made. Tim's taking a look at it. CRI and networking behavior. This is a follow-up to a Slack thread. I can't say that I understand why, but I'm told this behavior is unexpected. The container runtime sometimes gets a run pod sandbox request where the host port is 0. I believe Antonio wants to check if we are sending that info on purpose to the CRI API or if it is just an oversight. More
So
importantly, go ahead.
The summary of the thread is Antonio confirmed. In fact, we do populate the host port field even when it's 0. So historical context, early on in the Kubernetes cycle, we thought it was clever to just say, well, optional fields where there's 0 value means it's out of bounds. And so host port was just defined as an int instead of a pointer to int. And we said, if it's 0, then it means it's not set. Ignoring the fact that 0 has sort of a well understood meaning for port allocations. And then when CRI happened, it just takes that 0 and puts it into the protobuf and passes it through as 0, which it probably shouldn't have done, but it's not exclusive to this. I'm sure that there are other 0 value, not specified fields. Anyway, it sounds like CRI receives the 0 and all the known implementations of CRI just ignore 0 because they know that we're stupid. And the question, I think, comes down to, should we just document that 0 means ignore me? Is that a fair summary, Antonio?
Yeah.
If all of the known CRI implementations do that and there's really nothing for them to do with it, could we just stop passing host port 0?
But the problem is that you pass a lot of data, right? It's not 0. There is container port plus container name plus whatever thing. And there is a lot of people doing weird things hooking into this CRI information. So my concern is somebody's using that data for something. Do we break them?
I think the answer to Dan's question is yes, we should, but is it worth the effort to figure out if this is going to break anybody? And that I'm not convinced of.
And I guess the counter argument is the current way already broke somebody, right? That's how we got this bug.
No,
It wasn't clear. Yeah, go ahead, Antonio.
no, the person wanted to implement a new container runtime and say, what should I do with this?
So I think the answer is obviously you should ignore it if it's 0, because that's the historical behavior, and you might encounter a cluster that does this. Even if we fix it for the future, you still have to handle it as 0.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, without looking, that there are 100 other fields where we pass empty strings or 0 integers or, non-specified information that you're supposed to ignore if it's the 0 value.
But Tim, why did you say that we should? So this comes into a type, right? It's the container port theme. That I imagine that was you trying to get the Docker port theme of the time, right?
That's right. But protobuf, effectively all fields are optional. So we should have just not specified it at all.
Oh, so in the new type, you shouldn't get the host port at all.
That's right. If we were designing the API, the Kubernetes side API from scratch, we would have used a pointer field there. And then if you don't specify a host port, you get nil instead of 0. But we didn't do that, and we can't fix it without breaking clients, so it's just not worth fixing. But protobuf, every field is effectively pointer anyway. So we could just pass it as nil and have protobuf say, not has.
And that's my question. With protobuf today, can we modify the protobuf in the CRI to not pass just that field, the host port field?
Yeah. Yes. If you link the code that sets it to the host port value, if we just remove that one line of code, then host port will come through as null.
Oh, that's and that is not a breaking chain.
But it might. Who knows if it's going to break people?
But so what can happen? That somebody tried to read that field that doesn't exist. So they're going to get the Golan type, and it's going to be a 0.
If they read it through protobuf, they'll probably get a 0 unless they check the has, proto.has port, has host port. But it's been a while since I played with proto, so I'm not exactly sure what they would get.
Whatever, they need to move from the proto, what I'm trying to say is, the people that read the proto, as soon as they read the Golan type, right? We do the conversion from the proto to they are going to get a 0 there, right?
Yes, if they read it into the Go type. I don't know the CRI, do they retain it as proto? I imagine, the CRI type is not a one-to-one mapping to the Go type necessarily. So no. I imagine they just keep it in the proto form and probably do the right thing, except here we've given them, I imagine that at some point in time, somebody, Mike Brown or somebody said, oh, this should be a has, and they checked it and they were like, why do I has a 0? What does that mean? Oh, I'll add the if less than or equal to 0, right?
Okay.
They shouldn't need to add the less than either, but they did because they're properly paranoid. And to be fair, not every CRI client is necessarily, gone through the Kubernetes API verification process. So, be liberal in what you accept means looking at a 0 and saying, I don't know what to do with that, so I'm going to ignore it. And then if we ever wanted to do dynamic allocation of host ports, then we need to do something other than specify 0.
It looks like on the container D side, we skip that if it's 0.
Yeah, somewhere up the bug, Antonio or Mike Brown linked to, or one of you two linked to the code. So I think the only thing to do here is document that in the CRI spec. If this is 0, there's no host port.
There is a comment on both host port and container port around the default behavior of 0.
In CRI or in Kubernetes API?
In the CRI API repo, right on line 205. And I sent
awesome. If that's already done, oh, you pasted it here in the chat. If that's already done, then we can just close the bug, I think, right?
Default 0 not specified.
No, what?
It's documented.
It's documented that we don't know what
It's
is that.
documented right there. I'm looking at it. It's documented. All right. So what I had originally started posting was that we need to ensure that we have documentation that covers this. Is there another place that, how can we improve the documentation overall across all the places where it might be documented?
I mean, clearly the API.proto could be improved here, right? Like, you shouldn't have a port mapping with a host port of 0 in the first place. But if you do, you should ignore the whole host port. Likewise, I think if you have a container port that is 0, you should ignore the whole port mapping. It's invalid.
Okay. Does that comment cover it then? Anything you want to
I
add
think
there?
so. Does anybody want to jump on taking the documentation fix, or should we throw it back to the original user and see if they'll do it?
I've got a
50-50 on whether they do. Sorry, go ahead.
quick question. Can we change the behavior to not set it if port is 0?
In theory, we could, and it should be correct, because in theory, whoever's looking at this code is just iterating on all the host ports that exist already, right? So they would just iterate one less. In practice, if we want to do that, somebody's got to go out and convince us that it actually is safe to do for all reasonable CRI users, which I'm not against somebody doing. It's just kind of a low return project.
So is the assumption somebody might expect a 0 and still not do anything with it? Well, I guess the assumption is we don't know what anybody's doing, so we need to confirm that.
Yes, if we wanted to change it from, yes, exactly. Somebody somewhere might be doing something clever with this. I can't imagine what that is, but
That's what I'm trying to figure out, yeah.
yeah, but man, I've been wrong about this in the past. So
Okay, right. Just because it exists means we have to assume that somebody is somehow using it, even though we can't figure out how.
They could be using it for non-host port purposes, right? Like they just want to know what ports the pod is listening on for some reason.
Exactly. It could be in their logs. It could be in their metrics. It could be some alert. And if we stop passing it, then, you know, their alerts will start firing and they'll be like, what the hell? And we can tell them you made a really bad assumption based on our really bad code. But that doesn't make them feel any better.
Yeah.
So I'm happy
awkward.
if somebody wants to fix it. I just think it's a low return on somebody's time.
I'm just wondering what happens if one day we do want to pass a 0. How I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
At this point we can't.
Yeah.
Right? We can never pass 0 and have it mean something because we broke this. So if we want to do a dynamic allocation, which has come up a couple times in the past, if we wanted to say dynamic host ports, we would have to pass a new field that was like allocate dynamic host port true.
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, if somebody wants to take on the technical fix, like go crazy. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your free time. We all have different ideas of fun. This one seems like it's going to be a lot of work for, you know, a relatively little good feelings. It always feels good to delete code.
Roger that. I put a help on it for now.
Okay. And the CRIs will still keep their code because they're going to be appropriately paranoid.
Roger that.
Help is a magnet of a lot of things. So
do you think I should put something else on it?
No, it's fine. I think if this comes back up, like if we did you triage accept it?
Oh, you're right. I forgot to do that.
If this comes back up for retriage, we should probably just close it. Like the reality is probably nobody's going to tackle this. Excuse me, nobody's going to tackle this.
Roger that.
I
Okay.
couldn't, in good faith, send an intern to work on this.
Is there, so with regards to the documentation, is there anywhere else, other known places for the documentation to be updated?
I think if you update the CRI proto, all the documentation will be updated properly.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure if you're signing up for this, but if you were, I would probably also go look at the Go types for host port just to see if they're any clearer or if they could be any clearer.
Yeah, I'm asking the question just to probe. Let me go look around before I sign up.
I mean, hopefully it's just you update a few words and you rerun the code generators and all the docs get updated.
Yeah.
And you write a blog post explaining how all these things work, and that's the perfect thing.
You write a new KEP explaining how we're going to change the documentation.
Cool. I'll fix DNS while I'm at it.
All right.
Shane, you're driving.
Yep.
What's
So
next?
in theory, we went through all the unassigned ones. We could spend some time going through the assigned ones. We have 20 minus the unassigned ones, so roughly 15 or so. Do we want to do that?
I closed a couple this morning, just before the meeting. There are a few that have been brought back for re-triage that maybe we want to look at.
You want to start with the oldest?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the oldest one is no way to configure external IP addresses for a node with kubelet from 2017, and it was. Wait, why is this the way? Okay, we were actually talking about it last year. Dan's last update, Dan and Tim talked about it, and he said the original issue about adding external IPs when not using a cloud provider, there has been no progress on that, including agreement on whether or not it is actually a good idea. So if that is the state of things, then it's just kind of stuck. Okay.
Dan, this is your wheelhouse. I've mostly
Yeah.
paged out what's going on here.
That comment still applies. It is unclear if there's really if external IPs are, well, I mean, I guess they are used for something. Node addresses are just a disaster. Somebody needs to pick them up and love them and fix the world.
Just
Triage.
as a note, we had a regression because of node addresses last week in the last release. So every new release, we have a bug with node addresses.
Should we consider this one triage accepted?
I was going to say, Dan, like maybe you can follow up again and say this is a real bug for future us. This is a real problem, and realistically, it needs a whole lot of thought about what we want to do about node addresses, and then triage accept it.
It's triage frozen, I think, or what?
Oh, it came up as
cycle
needs
frozen.
triage.
Yeah, no, sorry. Up until yesterday, Lifecycle Frozen was still eligible for re-triage. Ben merged just yesterday the bot changes that will leave these alone. So once we triage accept it, we'll never see it again.
Yeah,
Until we fix the problem, right? Then we will see it again.
Well, it'll never come back through the triage queue.
Roger that.
All
Is that cool, Dan?
Sure.
All right. DNS config applies RFC 11232 broadly to searches. Tim had this one. It started in 2020.
Isn't this Adrian? Aren't you working on this?
Maybe. Scrap a little bit. Yeah, I guess I am.
Is it a dupe with the other ones?
I think I mean this was before my time, but I think this caused the KEP to get created, and then I took over from the KEP. So assign me, I guess.
Okay.
And then also triage accepted.
Triage accept.
All right. Thank you. Bloop. Bloop. pod readiness probe cannot be directed at a specific IP family.
We talked about that one.
We talked about that one. I was about to say that one's ringing a bell. Inconsistent reset of changes to Kubernetes endpoints. Cal looked at that one at some point. Where do we end off with that? Oh, I looked at this one too. I have no memory of it because it was a year ago. Okay.
Is it the one that the endpoint controller doesn't process updates?
Yeah, if you change some attributes of a Kubernetes endpoint in the default namespace, they are not reset. If you change those attributes of the Kubernetes endpoint in the default namespace, it is not reset to the correct value. This differs from the IP address, which is reset rapidly.
I think. Okay, hold on. So the endpoint controller, but well, Dan is going to kill the endpoint controller, so we can kill all this stuff altogether. But the endpoint controller doesn't handle updates on the, so it just doesn't handle update. It just will not process if you modify an.
No, this is an endpoint controller. This is the
Yeah.
Kubernetes API server.
Ah, that's the default.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is don't do that then.
I mean, realistically, the API server part that writes out the endpoint for the Kube API server probably should just blast all the fields instead of being gentle about it.
I think that it does a diff only on the IPs. So
Yeah, I'm
if
sure
I
we're
remember
too
the-
clever for our own good.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because some people does annotations and all the stuff. And
So it really needs to get fixed. However, it's from 2021, and I'm guessing the two
you
people
can
project-
assign to me that one.
Okay.
Because oh well, that's more reason to push on Dan's cap for killing endpoint.
Yeah, my comment in 2021 was this shouldn't be that hard, and then just nobody picked it up, it looks like. Maybe I'm wrong. That was 3 years ago, 4 years
Well,
ago now.
the reconciler of endpoints in the API server is another don't touch.
Yeah, but see, Antonio, we throw all those problems at you.
Thank you very much.
Should we keep going through a few more?
We're at the half hour.
Make sure
How
nobody
many-
added anything to the agenda. Nobody did. We
Yeah.
covered quite a bit of ground.
Yeah, and most of the opens are not most, but a good chunk of them are flaky tests.
Yeah.
Oh, you had the your preferred one, the service duplicate port numbers key. I lost it. Yes, okay. What is going on with this? Are you going to fix this with the server-side apply and all this stuff, or you just gave up?
Sorry, which issue?
The problem with the service port that use the key doesn't use the protocol in the key or something like that.
Oh, that's not open in the triage queue though.
No, I'm seeing Shane's screen.
It says need triage.
Oh,
You got that to sign.
why am I not seeing it on mine? Label SIG Network needs triage. Oh, there. Sorry. Yes, I just skimmed over it because my brain doesn't want to see those. Yes. Oh God. We still do not have a way to fix this. Like, I've thrown Joe Betts at it, I've thrown Antoine at it, and none of us have figured out how we can fix, patch, and merge when it comes to service ports. Like, the only real answer that I have for people now is don't do that. Don't try to use, especially client-side apply, when it comes to services, and especially when it comes to services and ports. Kubectl replace is almost always going to be better than patch for services. It's broken and there's no way we can fix it because it's embedded in all the client-side logic, and there's no safe way that I could find, that Joe could find, and Joe knows this code better than anybody, to migrate that over.
So when you say replace is a put.
Yes.
Okay. And then what the thing is, you get the whole service the way that you want it, and you put that service on.
So you can
send the
do it.
put with
So you may remember, Antonio, a
the
while
cluster
back.
IP thing was the problem, right?
Yeah, there was this whole discussion about whether put of a service should be idempotent or not.
Yeah,
and-
that's why now I'm trying
Right.
to.
So it is. So when you do a put of a service, it becomes a quiet patch where we take the cluster IPs, all the things that we auto allocated, and we just sort of apply them to your new thing if you didn't specify them. And so in that sense, it's kind of its own version of server-side apply that works properly.
Okay, so
So-
So does
the
this need
solution now.
documentation?
Yeah.
Sorry, two people talking at once. Shane?
Is this a situation where it sounds like we're stuck, but we need to potentially improve the documentation around this?
Yes, we have thus far failed to find a solution. Various people have signed up for, oh, there's got to be a way to fix this. And then after, order hours of work deciding, I don't have time for this, or I haven't found something in hours, so therefore there must not be something. I'm still, I have this kernel of hope in the back of my brain that says, no, we just haven't found the right expression of how to convert this yet. Realistically, we should update the documentation, and I don't know if there's a way to throw a warning when you try to do an apply.
I remember when this came up before, I suggested that we should add a way to do that because we have the same problem with node addresses, where if you try to naively patch them, it will screw it up because of the way they're annotated. I think there may actually be an issue saying that we should add that warning mechanism.
But the
That
node
would be-
addresses you fixed that, right?
I fixed Kublet's use of it, which it does by doing a strategic merge patch with an override in the patch to make it work the way it wants to and ignore the annotations.
All right, I'll throw a comment on this thread today, and basically just concede defeat for the moment. Dan, if you know the node ports or the patch warning issue, or send it to me. Otherwise, I'll just go digging for it. That would be great. It's unclear to me all the various paths we would have to find and say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Server-side apply seems to work fine for ports as long as you only use server-side apply, but as soon as you throw client-side in, then everything goes to hell. That was the most recent bug report. Somebody who had done server-side from their controller and then client-side from a human and then server-side from the controller broke.
Roger that. Okay.
All right, I'll respond to this one today.
All right. Should we call it for triage then for now?
I think that's fair.
40 minutes in. Probably should call it. All I did was add this so that everybody knows that I added the annual report. I went to all the sub-projects and tried to ping people and collect any information to provide the highlights from our various projects and the calls for help in there. At this point, I mean, you're welcome to put a comment on there. I'm kind of thinking it'll probably merge any second. But do feel free if you see something in there you want better represented to make another PR to continue to update this report. So if there's anything that seems misrepresented or underrepresented there, please take a look. And we'll finish up our 2024 report. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
And with that, I think we will adjourn unless anybody has any last minute, stop the world real quick. We got to talk about something.
Go forth and read PRs.
Cheers, everyone.